Thank you very much. So unlocking the power of AI in pharmaceutical development. So why don't we start off with a quick intro of Keith and I and our respective companies and why we're in this. The goal is one of us is a user and one of us does implementation, and Keith is the master of implementation. Go ahead, Keith.
Hey folks, my name is Keith Perrin. I am the CEO at Court Square Group. We manage infrastructure for life science companies, pharmaceutical, biotech, med device, consultants, CROs, anybody that needs a highly regulated environment, particularly 21 CFR Part 11 that's going to be audited by the FDA. So in our environment, we call it ARC. It's an audit-ready compliant cloud environment. And we have a repository called RegDocs 365 with a life science basic component, EDM, and ETMF reference model. And we're currently working with Kevin on a CMC module for the very same product. So that's where we come together. And I think it's great that we're able to talk with you guys today about AI because we're adding a bunch of new AI functionality into our systems. And I think it's important to understand some of the rationale behind that and what we can do with that. Go ahead, Kevin.
Me, Kevin Bidorf, founded CMC or SCX CMC Solutions. The SC stands for Science, Supply Chain, Simplified Consulting. It is our tagline. I've been around for 25 years, been in Boston for 19 of it. Done a lot of different work, and I've always looked at what is the next innovation and how can we make drug development faster, better, higher quality as well. So I had the opportunity to do the Vertex continuous manufacturing line, did the justification there as part of my learning journey. And I think all of us are still learning with AI as I become more and more. The more I know, the more I realize I don't know about AI. And that's why I'm really working on this and discovering that for pharmaceutical development. So I've done three conferences: the Compaction Simulation Forum, the Advancing Drug Development Forum, which we'll talk about at the end of the talk, the Continuous Manufacturing Forum. SCX is a solutions provider. We are a consulting company. We're your drop-in CMC team, or if you just need a single expert, that's what we do. And our goal is to provide expert solutions. Now, as we get into this, let's start off with AI and how long has AI actually been around? And it's one of my favorite quotes when I really started getting into AI. It's once the computers get control, we might never get it back. We should survive at their sufferance. If we're lucky, they might keep us as pets. You know, you might want to think that's an early quote, but this quote was quoted before I was even born, actually, by Marvin Minsky in 1970. So when you start looking at this, artificial intelligence is not a new idea, and computer control is not a new idea. We're just starting to see the full power of computing, the full power of application. And our goal here with Keith and I is to look at pharmaceutical development implementation. And what we'd like to do with you guys as an audience is look at pharmaceutical development CMC. What are our pain points? And are there AI solutions to help? I always said, when I looked back at my days of doing NDAs, ANDAs, is the hardest part for me was the ability to find, summarize, and analyze data. And really, that was one of the applications I've always seen. And Keith has done many applications. And Keith, I'd like you to comment on this and what you've seen as well.
Well, sure. And actually, that original quote you put out there, I think back that I was 9 years old at the time, so I was alive. But when I was in college and I graduated college back in '83, I had a chance of going to grad school to actually do stuff, and AI was actually one of the tracks. But back then, the computing power was there, just wasn't there for what you needed to really do with AI. It really has caught up over the years. I mean, the power has dramatically increased to the point now where it's actually feasible to do some of the things that we're really doing today. And I think that more so than ever, we've been collecting data at such a great rate that unless we have AI-based tools, we'll never be able to deal with all the data that we have. And particularly with the work that you guys work on with drug formulation, there's so much data collected at the equipment level, and dealing with all of that is going to be increasingly difficult to deal with just with manual effort and with some of the tools that we're using today. So incorporating AI into all that is going to be crucial. I'm a big believer in AI as a looking across the board at what you need to put together and then kind of bringing the right tool to bear on it. One of the big things that I think about in this space with AI is really around um, the fact that so many companies are springing up and they're all about AI. AI is still really in a hype cycle for most companies, and they're very tentative. There's lots of POCs going on, proof of concept tools and things, but they're not really thinking about the ROI or what they need to do with those. So I try to think about from a business perspective, how do we utilize AI to help the most with what we're stuck with from a manual perspective. So I think that's where I come from. And having a content report repository with our RegDoc system, we've got lots of clinical and regulatory content. And I think that unlocking some of that content is going to be vitally important. So I think that's kind of the background I come in with, Kevin, and where my focus area when we're trying to come up with solutions.
Yeah, you brought up a good point of ROI, return on investment. Is any new innovation I've ever brought into every company, the return on investment is very important. Every scientist likes a nice new shiny piece of equipment, but you still have to justify that to management and what is the actual return on investment, and whether it's a short-term return on investment or a long-term return on investment. Also,
Well, and I think to that point, Kevin, I think one of the problems that we have is
yep.
people are expecting way too much out of things, and what they do is sometimes they'll jump into the AI bandwagon and they'll pick some very interesting area to go after, but not think about, did I really save any money from the company? We just spent X amount of dollars putting together a solution that we could have done in half the time with some simple automation tool or something. So it's really understanding how AI fits with what you're trying to put together and if it's worth it. Because what'll happen is if you do that and you come up short from an investment perspective, what'll happen is it's very hard to get that next project or the next project or the next project. So that concept of walk before you run, put things in place, learn from your early investments will pay dividends in the long run.
Well, with that intro, let's dig into today's agenda. Let's talk about AI options, formulation of AI solutions, and the pun is intended with formulation, as a lot of us are formulators, looking at formulators, drug substance, or CMC people. Implementation, it's great. These are great ideas, but you do want them implemented. Data science versus pharmaceutical expertise is very important. There's you need to marry them together. You can't have one without the other. Buying AI software and applications. This is going to be a great presentation. But how do I apply this? Where do I get things? What do I want to look for? How does AI help us overall? And we'll give you some final thoughts. So AI options, there's a lot of AI options people look at already. Everyone knows ChatGPT, I believe. But AI has kind of been around, like autocomplete tools. Word has been awesome at this. Autocomplete tools, sentence complete tools, voice tools as well.
Yeah, your iPhone gives you stuff every day, right? I mean, you can't help but have it fill in stuff for you.
Yeah. Chatbots. Who doesn't love a chatbot when you're trying to get hold of United Airlines to change your ticket? Some of them are good, some of them are bad. But chatbots for automatic referrals and trying to triage problems to get you to the right spot. Peers, this is really, I work with a lot of AI. I work in parallel with AI. I ask AI to gather my data, look at my data, find holes in my data. But at the end of the day, maybe simple analysis they'll do. But at the end of the day, the human analysis of it and how you look at it is probably the most important part. So I really look at AI as a working in parallel. And Keith, comment on that one as well.
Yeah, I think that you have to have, particularly in this industry where we're so heavily regulated, one of the problems that people have is they talk about, well, how can I validate the system or how can I do this with this system? And one of the issues we have is that I believe you're always, particularly when you're dealing with clinical or regulatory information, you're going to have a human in the loop because somebody's going to verify that. I can tell you that I sit on a number of AI committees. I sit on a DIA, Drug Information Association, AI working group, and we have lots of people come in on a monthly basis into our meetings. And it's funny when you sit there. About a year ago, I can remember a lot of the people in regulatory were talking about generative AI, and oh, we would never use generative AI to create things that we would send into the FDA. And just a year later, once ChatGPT came out and people started jumping on the bandwagon, all of a sudden they can't move fast enough to try to figure out how can we generate things. We'll talk about that a little bit later because I think it's important to note that there are certain ways that you can use some of these tools, more importantly than others, particularly around, in our case, from a pharmaceutical perspective, you have a lot of IP. One of the things you want to be very careful about is my IP getting shared where I didn't know it was getting shared. And I think those are areas that we have to be very careful about from an AI perspective and do that. But when we're dealing with something that's going to an AI methodology or an AI tool that's going to create something that we're going to then use for other purposes, we really want to have that human in the loop to figure out, is it right or is it not? Now, if you set the right compliance around, do I believe it's going to be at a high enough confidence level? Then you can say, okay, yeah, we can do something with that. But if it falls below that confidence level that you're comfortable with, make sure that human's reviewing what's going on. And I think that's a huge part of doing it. I also believe that when you're dealing with humans, lots of humans have there's lots of manual things that we do.
Mhm.
And it's identifying those manual things that we do that can help us to do more efficient things with our time than wasting time on things that easily could be done from an AI algorithm.
Yeah. And the final one is having AI manage for us. And I don't think we're there yet in the pharmaceutical industry. I think the first, second, and third one, AI is a tool, AI is an assistant, and AI is a peer helping us work in parallel. But given the highly regulated system we're in, we really don't want them to fully complete tasks and just have them approved. We want to work in parallel and at least double check. Any questions on that one before we go to this one here?
So there is no question in the Q&A box, but I was wondering if I can ask some like ice-breaking questions because probably attendees are trying to break the ice to ask the question. So many of the attendees, I can see that they're from pharmaceutical or biotech industries, and drug development or manufacturing is their focus. So I was wondering if you can give us more insights on how we can utilize AI to identify, let's say, the potential risks and challenges early in the drug development processes so that down the line we can save more money and speed up the development process.
Yeah, interesting. I look at saving time and speeding up the development process. Right now, one of the more frustrating things I've done in the past, it's really finding and gathering data and summarizing data. That's what AI is very good at. If you get a training set, it's just it will go something as simple as dissolution data from phase 1 to phase 3. It's like all that data is done over multiple different years, multiple databases. How can you bring that in, find where it is, have it summarized, so you can go and do the analysis yourself, as one example. The other one is just looking for gaps. An IND is the same. It's the same process every time. And this is what I'm working with Keith on. The IND is very well structured. They know what they want. It's like, where are the gaps in that? Looking at it, seeing, yeah, this section's a little short, or this section's missing X, Y, and Z, and at least identifying that as a stopgap analysis.
I think there's a couple things to jump on top of that as well. Word one is there's a lot. You may hear the term digital twin, and people are starting to work a lot with digital twins now and seeing how there are different effects on the body. And as we get more computing power, the ability to have a digital twin to replicate more systems within the human body, make it easier to do in silico AI tools to look at the things that you've asked about. So I think it's really important that that kind of activity continue to go on. I know that years ago I mentioned to Kevin that I had a master's from RPI, and I remember they've got a constellation program where they were putting together 2 different departments that were working on things like they had somebody who was working on blood flow analysis, and they said that the biologic people were working with somebody who was doing airflow analysis for helicopter blades, and by combining some of the techniques they were using, they're putting things together to come up with that stuff. Those are the areas where AI can actually fit in heavily when they're starting to look at how are we looking at it in other industries and bringing things together for doing what you're trying to do within the CMC space.
Excellent. So before we move forward, Kevin, so we have a question in the QA box. So Ned says that Kevin knows me, but I know Ned as well. Yeah. So he's asking a very good question, which you touch upon a little bit back. So AI requires significant data banks to be effective, and we are all afraid of losing our IP, as previously touched upon by you, right? So how can we move past this barrier?
So let me jump on that as an implementation person.
Yes.
There's many of the different vendors that you're working with have started to put together what they call clean rooms. I know we're an AWS partner, and they've got a thing called a clean room where they can actually combine data from multiple places, but still keep it separate so that you don't have to worry about that data being interacting with things. And it's a really important topic when you're dealing with machine learning, because one of the issues you have to deal with is I'm going to need to have some kind of data sets that we're going to use to train the models that we're working with. And I want to make sure that that training data doesn't bias the models that we're working with as well, so that we can still validate the models over time. So from that perspective, the vendors themselves working on both the storage and how you're going to be accessing that data are actually working on exactly that same problem, so that you can maintain what you want behind your firewall without worrying about that getting shared with somebody else.
Yeah, and I'll talk about the number of data. You're right. The more data you have, the more accurate it is. But you can start off and you look at the percent accuracy of it, and it gives you a starting point. It's not the final solution. I don't want people to think AI is going to give me the final solution. I want AI to think this gives me a starting point with a confidence interval. So if you had 10 million data points, you'll have a tighter confidence interval if you had 100 data points. So really look at it as a confidence interval moving forward. And then with like any statistics or anything else, there's always an outlier, and especially in drug development, there's always outliers, but you at least try to get a starting point.
Excellent.
Formulation is the key to determine if AI can be used. First of all, can it be formulated into a machine learning problem? What are your data points with it? If is it a picture which can be formulated in a machine learning program? Is it a whole bunch of a large data set? Is it words? So what are you looking for? And can it be formulated into a machine learning program?
Well, I think Kevin, one of the other things around that whole concept is, and part of our AI working group, we actually changed the name of our AI working group to intelligent automation, because sometimes it's not necessarily AI that's doing the work. It's you want to look at intelligent automation. How do we automate this first, or look at that process automation and then bring in AI to actually do those pieces that that need machine learning, so that we can take the human out of the loop, let them do more of that work, and chunk through large volumes of data. So I think that's a really important method to how to determine where you want to fit in those machine learning algorithms to do things.
Yeah. And when you're doing this, look at the tools that are already available. There's a lot of tools out there already that, look at machine learning, or maybe you don't need an AI tool to solve your problem.
And there are some companies too that are, Kevin, that are putting together libraries of AI routines that you can call on, things that you can use in one area. We actually developed a tool with a company out of Montreal that was specific for cross-referencing of documents. And that actually, once we started doing that for the M&A space, we found out that, hey, anytime I get a large bolus of documents, can I use this for that particular tool? It worked perfectly for those kind of things. And that's the thing, is you look at what it's doing for one area, but can I translate that somewhere else? The same thing could probably say for the CMC space. Can I use something that's used elsewhere to be able to look at all the documents that we put together around this, and repurpose them for different areas?
Next one is it possible to even solve the problem? I mean, if you can't solve it over X amount of time, you can't expect necessarily AI to solve it for you. It's there as a tool, and like with any computer programming early on, is like garbage in, garbage out. So is it solvable, and can you get an actual answer or not? So,
yeah. So Kevin, before we move forward, because it's like kind of related question. So Ned again asked, what outcomes from those liabilities you talked about, essentially regarding the IP and so on, essentially all be the same?
Well, it's not, the libraries aren't necessarily the data, the output. The libraries are actually the routines that are going to be used to determine what the output's going to be. So they're using machine learning to identify the analyze the algorithms they're putting together. So these are the algorithms you would use to figure out what you need. So if they've got an algorithm that does some kind of quality routine, it can be used for certain areas, but it can also be repurposed for somewhere else. And it may be used in conjunction with other algorithms. So when you're talking about the output is heavily dependent on the training data and what it's using, which is one of the reasons why the more you train a system on your data, the more it's going to come out with the things you're trying to find. Sometimes you want to have training data that's outside of your training data because you want to be able to do things or change the way the output's going to be. In generative AI, on purpose, sometimes you want to only use your own data. Like when I work with a large pharma company, a lot of times we may have something that's tailored for looking at clinical documents across multiple companies, but you want to use the machine learning on your documents so that they can learn how your actually output gets formulated, and that's what you want to do. So it all depends on what you're trying to do, and I don't believe that the output's going to be the same. Now, what we want to do is make sure that from a validation perspective, those algorithms can generate some of the same output, so that we can validate that the output's going to be coming out. But when I start looking at your data, it's going to come out with different output. So I think that's going to be the important part to think about.
Yeah, and if you're looking at IP, if it's an internal software system, it's an internal software system. It doesn't have to go out to the general public. You can have generative AI programs just for your internal company. But yeah, like we said, it's the data set overall.
Awesome.
So there's some obvious areas in development and manufacturing for AI. And I always look at this as it's the sheer amount of data you're looking at. And some of these are more for internal and CDMOs, like quality control. If you look at all the amount of data coming out from quality control, whether it's your dissolution data, your hardness data, all your process temperatures, everything. So it's looking at small changes and tracking those small changes and see if there's the potential for a defect coming out with that. So trying to organize that data set. Look at batch monitoring for insurance of consistency and completion. And it's looking at, are there changes over time? You might find your batch monitoring is different in July than it is in December. You have a different set of results. So you can have environmental impacts. You can notice, it works better on a Friday than it does on a Monday. You try to figure out why is that the case or not the case with that.
You may cross data over a weather database to find out that maybe it was more humid on certain days, things like that. So
yeah,
those are things from a manufacturing process that you want to think about. How controlled is the environment that I'm doing what I'm trying to do in?
Yeah.
One of the companies I work with up in Canada, they've got a thing called quality by design, where they're actually looking at the forms that are getting generated by some of the output, or when people are writing things down on stuff within the lab. They want to making sure that everything's put into place and that everything's taken care of from that. So they are already kicking out exceptions to make sure that from a quality perspective, you've got everything that you need for that.
Yeah, and there's external things that come into play as well. I keep mentioning the weather. Is it, if you're close to a train track, is the train more busy on one day versus the other? Is it affecting the machinery? Predictive maintenance, like wear and tear. Yeah, over multiples difference of batches, are you seeing slight differences in defects over time, and the ability to predict when you need to change punches or when you need to do preventative maintenance to keep a consistent batch versus waiting for that final failure. And then process optimization with quality by design and the ability to optimize your process to again, to Keith's points, like environmental conditions, like you might want different process conditions in January than you do want in July, and you can do those slight modifications to ensure a consistent process.
Yeah, and I think that there's lots of different algorithms for a number of these different areas that, and again, combining algorithms together in certain areas make the most sense. Sometimes it could be a quality control and the batch stuff that's working together that are necessary.
Yeah, since we are in that topic, so I was wondering,
Yeah.
like, if I can ask another question. So you rightly touched upon how AI can help in the quality control, batch monitoring, or in-process analysis. But so my question is, like, supply chain management and logistics optimization is also a very important aspect in pharmaceutical manufacturing and supply. So could you please give us some insights on how AI can help on supply chain management and logistics optimization effectively?
Well,
Yeah.
part of it could be from a supply chain perspective. If you know who your suppliers are and there are other suppliers in the market or in the geographic areas that you're at, and you know that all of a sudden you get some orders in. You know, some of this could be built in your own systems already that are talking about just-in-time manufacturing and they need to have certain things. But you may want to find out that you know, you may have something that's out there looking and sees that maybe there was a problem at a certain plant and all of a sudden some supplies coming from that plant are going to be going out. So you need to find somebody else to get that information from. So those are areas where AI can actually be helpful for identifying supply chain hiccups and things that are happening, or even if there's travel related issues. It's not, you know, if there's a hurricane hitting Florida right now and your
Yeah.
main lab is in Florida, guess what? You may have a problem getting some stuff out of those guys in the next couple of days. How are you going to backfill that? You know, those are things that AI can put alerts out for you to think about because they may not be top of mind for somebody up here in Massachusetts that's working with somebody down in Tampa.
I agree with that. It's supply chain disruptions. The probability of supply chain disruptions. Like we said, the weather's getting more and more volatile. You know, economic policies are getting a little different as well, and the ability to predict those and to give you different options going through as well.
Yeah, thank you. We have a question in the QA box.
Yeah.
So the question is, would it be possible to show a case study of using AI to help the formulation development? The pros and cons probably, like, if not a case study today, but could you touch upon like how AI can help in the formulation strategy, design, the pros and cons, etc.?
Yeah, I would love to. I've been talking about this for years, is the ability to look at all your past formulations and do prediction. Like a lot of corporations that they keep all this information internal to themselves as corporate know-how. But if you look at someone like Crystal Pharmatech, the sheer amount of data Crystal Pharmatech goes through in a year from form development, formulation development, their database is huge. If they were able to implement AI, and they haven't told me if they are or not at this point in time, the ability to look at that data and process the data to help to inform prediction would be brilliant. And maybe I'll talk to Ridwan after this, and maybe we can work on a AI case study on form prediction, given all the molecule you guys have looked at. So Wei Lin, thank you for the question. It might motivate us to work on a paper for next year.
Absolutely.
And I can't tell you. So from my perspective, I've never worked on a formulation related AI project. However, I can tell you from use cases of other ones from a generative AI perspective where we wanted to create protocols. So working with both CROs, sponsors, and some of the central labs, we're able to kind of figure out how can we create protocols that are the best for putting together kits or getting things out to the market, particularly for clinical trials and doing some of the work. Now, the part of that's working through past data and then working with what are the ingredients that are going to be part of that clinical trial. So putting those things together, we can actually generate a starting protocol. It's never the end protocol. It's going to be the starting protocol, and then the human's going to be in the loop, and they're going to tweak that. In our case, one of the use cases that I use, I talk a lot about documents because we have a document repository. A formula, sort of like what you're talking about from a formulation perspective. We have a tool it uses the concept of RAG. RAG is retrieval augmented generation. I want to be able to take labeling information from multiple systems that may have that about that product label, and I want to be able to feed those into my RIM system. Well, I can use an AI tool that knows how to go about it and pull the information from multiple disparate systems and be able to take that data and then pump it into my RIM system. So that's a use case where we're doing some of the kind of generative AI capability. One of the cons that I see that when you talk about formulation development is depending on the data that you're going to have, you got to be very careful about bias. And if you build certain things and they're not right, how are you tagging them so that you can make sure that it's feeding into whatever the output you're going to generate? So that's going to be a really important piece of keeping that human in the loop concept.
Yeah, so Ned also brought in a very good point that as the AI progresses and we do have more data to train the AI, so it will certainly lower the rates of inclusion of like the trash data, if I may say, no data is trash. I should take that back, but unwanted data in the database.
Yeah. Well, and sometimes you do want that unwanted data. It's like this is what an exception looks like. And the more it's always the more data, the better. It is what you don't want in the database is an outlier from a bad measurement, like the equipment went wrong, or things like that as you're trying to do predictions, or you want to at least tag that this is what data looks like when the equipment goes wrong. So when you're going through it, it can tag it as like, please double check the equipment measurement on that data when it comes through.
Well, I can relate it to another topic that I'm familiar with, Kevin, and part of that is when I'm looking at successful clinical trials that get a drug product approved, and then I talk to customers about look at all your data for the unsuccessful, the ones that didn't get approved, because you got some gems in that data that you can actually use to actually help inform the next time you go to submit a drug product. So by looking at past submissions that didn't work, you can find out what are the things that you put in there that caused it not to be accepted. Make sure that you're not doing that, and it learns from that as part of the machine learning algorithm. So I think it's important to keep all of your data, whether good, bad, or indifferent, because that's going to feed into it. There's going to be different machine learning that comes out of it, but it's important to have that data because you may find that maybe it's a different patient cohort that you're dealing with, or maybe you found a smaller cohort of patients that dealt with, but it was effective on those, but wasn't effective on others. But because you were so narrow in your endpoints, you didn't get there. So I think it's really important to look in totality at all of your data and how it's going to affect the end result.
Yeah. Data science versus pharma technical SME. I'll have you start on this one, Keith.
Yeah, I brought this up because I talked to Kevin early when we were going through this, getting ready for this. And one of the things that I want people to realize is there's lots of AI companies out there. My problem with AI is when you think about AI in general, we know if you think about different industries in the retail space, I mean, you could be walking around your house talking about something. All of a sudden on your Amazon Alexa comes up an ad for something, and it's like, wow, how did that happen? Well, they're always listening in and they're doing it. There's more AI being used in the retail space than anywhere else in the world because they want to get you to buy their products. The reality is all these AI companies know certain things about data science or certain things about how their algorithms work. The issue you have is unless you have a technical SME in your space working with them, they're going to come up with what they think. They're not going to have that subject matter expertise to help you figure out what the tools are going to be. You have to work in conjunction with them to identify what the problem set is that you're going after and tailor them to tailor their methodologies and algorithms to work with what you're trying to do. So I think it's really important that you have the data and you have the understanding of your own data before you bring in the AI guys, because they're going to look at it a totally different way than you are. And I think it's really important to understand that data scientists, think one way. You got to be able to talk to them and understand it. Having that person that can translate between what you know from a scientific perspective to what they know from a data science perspective is going to be vitally important.
Yeah, and it really comes down to application. It's like garbage in, garbage out. You have a whole bunch of data. If you don't understand what that data is used for, needed for, how it could potentially correlate, and really even looking at the fundamental science of what is A versus B and how that is supposed to go from a pharmaceutical development standpoint, you'll always get an answer. I did computer modeling fluid dynamics for multiple years. You'll always get an answer, but without the right boundary conditions and knowledge to what Keith says, that input of data science and pharmaceutical science put together, you'll need that to get a proper answer.
So we have a question in the QA box. So this was related to the previous slide when you analyzed or touched upon the in-process analysis and quality control and manufacturing process. So how can AI identify and optimize key parameters from temperature and raw material quality, like the 2 day of the week, weather, in pharmaceutical formulation, batch monitoring? So how can AI really help us in that?
I'll talk about that. I always look at it. I've done a lot of jump statistical design, so it's a very manual process and very intensive. So what AI does is it helps automate that design. So if you look at a full jump database, you can put in the weather of the day, the temperature of the time, the humidity. You can put in what came out, what came in. You can do all of the correlations, and you can spend like 2 weeks doing data analysis. What AI does is help speed up that analysis. So you still need to know what data you want to get and everything else. You just can't say, oh yeah, why did my batch fail? You type it in. That's not going to happen unless you have a huge learning set behind it. So it really is the tool you're using and the data that goes into. And one of those things that's mentioned in there is you need a validation data set as well. So you have all your learning data sets. You don't want to put everything in there. You want to be able to validate that too. It's like any process manufacturing. It's like, okay, we've done all this learning, and now I've got these 4 other data sets. Let's put it in and see if it's predictive or not as you go through it.
But you mentioned something there, Kevin, that's important to note is that, hey, one of the most effective uses of AI is instead of you going out finding all that weather data and putting that stuff into your model, let AI go out and do that, find the right sources of all that data, depending on where they are, and save you the time of it. Again, that's where we want to save that time from a human perspective. Let the AI do the stuff that it can do and save your activity.
Yeah. And whether it's weather data, environmental data, changes in your excipient manufacturer, all of that, the C of A data that comes in. Trying to get all of your C of A data from all of your raw materials is an extremely tedious process. And each of them probably have anywhere from 10 to 20 variables in that. So the ability to use AI to bring all those 10 to 20 variables in there and compare it to everything else. Yeah, we talk a lot about the weather, but really that's a very few and far between effect. It's really all your input raw materials. And it could be something as easy as when was the equipment maintained last? That's people underestimate equipment maintenance, when it was done, the frequency of it was done, when you changed your tooling. And if you're starting to get product defects, is kind of looking back at that is when throughout the history is like, okay, if my tablet presser machine wasn't looked after by month 3, I'm starting to see more defects versus T is equal to 0. Or maybe it was tuned up, T is equal to 0. It's like, I've got all these defects. It was just maintained. Maybe it was maintained, or how they did the maintenance was a little too wrong, and it needed to loosen up a little bit, for lack of a better word.
Perfect. Thank you.
Buying AI software. There's no magic bullets. People want it to be magic. No magic bullets. It really is like buying any other software. You've got to do your due diligence. You got to ask your questions. You want to ask for your failures. Like, and I think Keith mentioned this earlier with everything. Failures are just as important as successes. We know that as scientists. We learn probably more from our failures than we do from our successes. So knowing that. And when you go, and my frustration in formulation development and doing that, not many people publish failures. No one wants to do that. They publish successes. Learn from the data, learn the code from the data, and understand how it learns in order to guide you as well. So AI software, there's a lot out there. In different applications. A lot of us are probably using it right now for every application as well. Keith,
Well, I think
Keith comment because he's an AI provider.
Yeah, I think one of the big things you got to work at. I work with different. Since we are a life science focused managed service provider, so I work with lots of different companies, lots of different software products. I work with different AI companies because I'm not an AI provider. We don't do the AI. I think I need to have somebody else who's got that understanding, and they can work with our subject matter expertise on the applications that we're dealing with to provide the solution. So I actually went out and found 3 different companies that I started working with because I wanted to find out how much they knew about the industry, what they knew. So I've actually created different tools with different people based on what their knowledge was and what they understood, how they can grasp the problem statement that we bring to the table, and what we can do to work with them. We have a company called Duxonomy that we work with that does they have an advanced searching engine that goes through multiple repositories. I can take data out of lots of different repositories, pull that stuff together, and do similarity analysis, similarity searching across documents, finding multiple documents that are in different systems, all those kind of things that would be out there that we couldn't do. We do translation on the fly. We could do it does OCRing on the fly as well, so we can grab data off of pictures or off of videos that people wouldn't think about. That, you know, I may have something to transcribe a video because I need data off of that. So for me, it's working with the right team there. I was at a recent Gartner event, and one of the things they talked about was, for those of you that know the ERP world and enterprise resource planning, there's a lot of companies that came out, SAP and all the other ones that came out and were doing things. And what sprung out from all these companies doing ERP software was these ERP implementation partners, because nobody really knew how to do ERP. They hired somebody that would help them to do ERP. Well, the same thing could be said of AI, and Gartner is actually predicting that as this AI wave gets past the hype cycle, it's going to be important to have AI implementation companies that you can work with that understand what is a large language model, what is RAG, what is all the tools that we can do. How can we narrow down the focus so that we're going to get the best ROI from whatever we're going to invest in. So I think it's important to understand that. And then it's also looking at the vendors that are out there. Are they attuned to that part of the industry? Like I said, we're in life science. We have special needs. That's why talking with somebody who understands how to put, you know, clean rooms together and put the data, separate the data out from you from somebody else, and be able to still be able to maintain the algorithms that they have, or the machine learning capability. Those are all going to be very important as you're coming up with your solutions.
So
a couple things that Kevin had asked me about, and I want to make sure we talk about this. We've got some due diligence capabilities that you know, when you buy a company, one of the hard parts is you never can see all the data, all the documents. You can't read through all the documents. It's almost impossible. And then 3 months, 6 months down the road, you're going through things, and all of a sudden you're not finding these toxicology tests, or you're not finding certain things around batch records. Well, using AI, we can actually go through and cross-reference all the documents in a bolus of documents you get. That would be something that helps you, because it can not only tell you what the documents you have, but it can also tell you the ones you don't have. So that's an area where it can actually help you a lot. Missing data. If you've got quality by design, you can actually look at forms that are being filled out already and be able to look at things, or regulatory filings or different things like that, and be able to see, is there data that's missing from some of these things? Or as I compare this to other ones, why do we have this much data here but not enough here? Can we flag this to have a human in the loop look at this and put another set of eyes on? So I think those are really important things that we've seen out in the industry.
No, and I look at this, it's to empower the scientists. It's not to take over our job, it's to make our job easier. No one likes going through databases and searching for data and compiling data. We want to be analyzing problems, solving problems. So it really will help and does help in productivity, fosters innovations in problem solving. So you can go right to the problem solving versus the problem of where is my data? What am I missing? What experiments do I need to do? And really helps you proactively look at that, and gets us to do the stuff we really want to do, which is solve problems and make medicines.
Now it's interesting because sometimes, you know, people say, well, I need large volumes of data to do stuff. I'm actually working with some companies, some AI companies, that their claim to fame is they're actually able to look at smaller data sets, and they can see patterns in smaller data sets, which is really intriguing, because as your data sets grow, you may be able to look at different patient cohorts and different things like that from that perspective. So that's why when I look at AI companies, I look to see what is the uniqueness about each one of those AI companies that I can work with.
So one important question is, what are the key regulatory challenges that pharmaceutical companies might face when implementing the AI-driven solution?
You know, I don't think, and maybe I'll naively say this, I don't think there is any. Because when you're going to your regulatory agency, you're still submitting an NDA that's reviewed by a human. You are reviewing that. You are personally responsible as a company when you submit that NDA. Now, if AI helped you summarize that data, got that data, found your missing data, but you as a company are still responsible for doing the QC of the data, ensuring it's GMP compliant, ensuring scientific rigor with that. So that's, I'll naively say that, but I'm sure I'm missing something.
Well, and I think some of the regulatory challenges that companies looking at, and actually it's using AI to help out with. I talked a little bit about the regulatory groups not wanting to generate output that's going to go to a regulator. They're now accepting of that, but they're going to still have that human in the loop, as Kevin said. And I think that's going to be the important part, is that nobody's really ever going to take that away from them or give up that, because you're always going to be responsible for that. I think the issue that you have is if you're going to use like real world evidence and you're tying that back and using AI to tie real world evidence to that, you're gonna want to show how you came up with the algorithms to put that together. So that's a lot of things that they're going to look at and understand, because sometimes that's and they're asking for that a lot more today when they're looking at patient data going into a drug submission. So I think that's going to be important for you to understand that those are hurdles you may have to overcome, but they're not insurmountable. A lot of people are doing that right now.
Yep, I agree. Well, one slide before we finish off, and I want to talk about something I'm passionate about. Keith's been a part of it, and so is Crystal Pharmatech as well. The Advancing Drug Development Forum is one of the nonprofit conferences I put on, and really what we try to do is look at how do you put in innovations in pharmaceutical companies. So to the last question's point is, implementing AI, what are the challenges? So we want to always look at what are the challenges facing pharmaceutical companies. We start off with a keynote interview, and this year it's Derek Henneke, and he's run CDMOs. He's on the board of multiple different CDMOs, so he sees challenges different there for smaller pharmaceutical companies. We're doing entrepreneurs, like a lot of pharmaceutical companies, Keith, myself, and different pharmaceutical companies. You start off small and then you grow. And how do you grow that company? How do you become successful? We're getting a lot of interest in femtech. There's full pharmaceutical, but the feminine part and the feminine drugs are very important to this. And it's a different biology overall, and it's a different need. A lot of us are big or small pharma. So how does big pharma look at in-licensing as well? And Keith talked about that, is there's a lot of data that comes in. AI really does apply to in-licensing and triaging that data. Or if you're in a small pharma company, is, what data does big pharma really look at, and really what data do I need to generate to help my in-licensing? I always say CMC will never be the reason why you get the significant amount of money, but it might be a reason why you get less money overall if it's not done well. The one that Keith and I are really working on is AI, integrating nimble companies. How do we integrate more companies together? How do we really look at, I want to integrate 3 different projects together, and how can I use AI to help me with that? And again, regulatory government affairs is key issues in submitting new innovations. And to your point, I said naively, I don't think it matters, but this is where I get to learn from people and really understand. And as always, we're all in companies. It's the team that actually solves the problem. It's the team that makes us highly productive. What happens when they fall apart? How do you bring that together? And then we like to end off with the fireside chat, the current state of the industry. So it's in Boston. It's in Cambridge this year, Cambridge, Boston area. Interested, please come. And it's always a good networking event. And really, we're going to be building upon this conversation of AI in multiple aspects of this forum this year. And these are our final thoughts. Everyone, do you want to start off?
Yeah, so like before moving on to the final thoughts, so one question is there any scenario that you can share with us where AI would need to be validated, for example, in pet applications and so on?
Patent applications. You need for patent application, you need scientifically robust data that's reproducible, and you need to show how to do it. So it doesn't necessarily need to be validated, but you need to know you have scientific robust data. And I use the word validation in a pharmaceutical sense. It is a pharmaceutical, I have to validate the process moving forward. So if you're using AI to control your process, yes. If you have a manufacturing process and you're letting the AI software automatically adjust your process parameters to get your proper output, it will need to be validated.
I think, Kevin, from a perspective of maybe more so in a medical device world where maybe I'm using algorithms that are tied in with my medical device, that may be an area where you're going to have to see more validation specific to those algorithms, because they want to make sure that those things don't harm humans, period.
Yeah, and if you look at process analytical technology, especially in continuous manufacturing, we're getting more and more and more data. I think a lot of that data sits around, and AI does have a application in process analytical technologies to gather that data, summarize it as well.
Yeah, and one question is, what strategies can pharmaceutical companies use to successfully integrate AI into existing manufacturing and quality control system? Will that disrupt the current operations?
No, I don't think it needs to, because a lot of your data is stored. So what you would do, you wouldn't implement it right away. You would take all that old data, summarize, that would be your starting data set. So you'd have your learning data set from, say, if you've been manufacturing for 10 years the same product, you'd have your learning data set. You could use, your first 8 years and see how that predicts the next 2 from your data set. And then you would want to do an implementation.
I think Kevin mentioned a couple of things earlier on, like even just that PM concept. If you had something now analyze your PM data or analyze your data over time, looked at PM data, and then look at any of your defects you have, can you correlate those two together? Is AI a good? That would be a good tool to do that stuff. You could do that without interrupting anything you're doing. But at the same time, get some great insight from doing it. I also believe that from a perspective of AI, you need to look at that process that you've got and find out where are the most manual efforts in that process that either you're doing something around it or you've got other tools that are doing something there. Can they be replaced by AI to make them faster? Again, everything's about speed to market. How do I get things done quicker and more efficient?
Yeah. And image analysis, manufacturing, we use a lot of steel. It's like, we use image analysis to see if you're seeing micro cracks or not micro cracks, and just that helps your maintenance as well. Keith, you want to give your final thoughts?
My final thoughts are that, I think that AI is here to stay. And if you think it's not, forget it, because the guy that is using it is going to replace that. No, AI is not going to replace our job, but the people using AI are going to replace our job.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to be important. And I think you need to really grasp what can be there. Again, it's still in a hype cycle. There's lots of things out there. I think you have to understand how can you start slow, bring it in, but don't go after such a project where if it fails, you're gonna get discouraged and not want to do something else. Try to get something that's don't eat the elephant. Let's get some small stuff, grow from that, and move forward.
I agree with you. AI is a tool. It's the next tool in our toolbox as we evolve as society. This is the AI revolution. We did the industrial revolution, data revolution, computer revolution. Now this is the AI revolution. So this is the next revolution in our society that will enable us to solve harder problems.
Cannot agree more. So we are almost at the end of our time. So indeed, AI can be very useful, as we learned today, to improve the speed, efficiency, and accuracy of pharmaceutical development process. AI can help us in refining our R&D efforts by allowing us to take educated decisions. So we need to use AI for our complement and to supplement our decision process. So I would like to thank our guest speakers today, Dr. Kevin Bittorf and Keith Parent, for your very insightful presentation. And I personally thoroughly enjoyed the session. Hopefully the attendees also did the same. Special thanks to our audience who managed some time from their very busy schedule to make this webinar series a very successful one. Hope to see you next time.
Thank you, guys.